we're going to work on something a little bit differently than is in the syllabus. And the reason I'm doing that is because in this class, I have a fair amount of people who took recording studio fundamentals, and I have a fair amount of graduate students who took film scoring with me last semester, and they have a fair amount of expertise. And what I'm going to do is assign something different than what I typically would do at this point. Would be another Bartok piece with more editing stuff. But I'm going to assign something that's going to take 3 weeks to finish. And each week you'll hand in your progress, and I'll give you feedback to make your piece better. And I'll get into it. And I'll incorporate all the same things that we were going to be learning, just going about it a different way. And the reason for that is because we're not in person, and there's things that we can't do because we're not in person. So I want to substitute other things that I've always wanted to teach to the students that I think will be valuable to students, but there's never really been in time with the in-person component of the class and the way that the syllabus has been set up. So hopefully you guys will all find it helpful. All right. So let me share my screen with you. So this is a Pro Tools session that I've got open here from a film I scored late last year. And my first attempt at zooming in. Okay, and as you can see, I've got 50 tracks of instruments in here, right? And what I did before I started working on the film was I created what I would call a template. And the template was the basic sound of the score, how I was going to go about it. And that meant that every time I started a new cue, I could just import the template. And the template contained the whole score was done with in the box, so to speak. I didn't hire any live players for it. It just wasn't possible. The budget was too low, and also the time and the amount of rewrites I had to do because the film had to be reworked several times because it went through many layers of corporate approval before ESPN finally deemed it was worthy for broadcast, which it broadcast last week, actually. It's just easier for me to deal with that all in the world of MIDI. So I set up what the sound of the score would be like. And then as cues would come up, if I needed another instrument, very easy to just add on to it. So let me make these a little bit bigger and I'll go through this for you. Okay, so notice that I've got a couple of oboe articulations, long and short. I've got high winds, which is a mid section. And then I use just sectional sounds like my mid brass. Right, that's a combination of trombones and French horns. Low brass, combination of bass trombones, contrabass trombones, and tubas. And then I've got, a bunch of choirs. And I had these, they're all pink. And then I had some synth sounds like this. Different pianos and marimbas and glocks, so pitched percussion, which included 2 different kinds of piano, marimbas, xylophone, there's probably bells, glock. And then this hauschka, which is sort of, these are all sounds that are created from a piano, but they're unusual. And then, let me scroll from over here, it's easier. Some percussion, right? Drums, drum kits. I've got a couple drum kits. Then I've got some stringed instruments. I've got guitar harmonics, which I used with its own effect, and a J bass. And then below that, I've got all my strings. I've got multiple string articulations, and I've got, right, that's called symphonic motions. And I've got pizzicato strings, sustained strings, You know, I write a lot of orchestral music that you guys don't have to when you work. I've got spiccato strings, which are the bow bounces on the string, short articulation. And just all sorts of stuff. I've got, you know, different size ensembles, I've got things that are doing weird stuff, textures. I've got a cello and violin patch. Upright bass. And so this was the sound of the score. And then I've got my effects, time-based effects in a folder, which is all my reverbs and echoes pretty much. And then below that, in this folder, all right, I've got all of those instruments, all that sound routed to this one music track, and I'll explain that in the future. But then below that, in this folder, I've got previous cues so that I know where I'm coming from and where I'm going to, so I don't clash keys when I'm moving into the next cue. So these are just rough mixes of the cue. And then below that, I've got all my assets for the film, the dialogue, and sound effects. So this is all set up before I start writing. And it's just a matter, I just open it up and I title it as a new session and save it. And I'm ready to start composing. Let's talk about a few things, though, that will be helpful for us. So let me play a little bit of this for you. How does that sound? If we look at the counter, I'm at measure 1. But if we look here, let me zoom in on that so you can see that. I love this. Whoops. Can you see the, yeah, you should be able to see.
Much better.
Right. So right here, it says 6:58. That's the time into the film that this cue is starting, right? But it's measure 1. So that's called the leader bar. I'm going to teach you how to do that. Move song start today. And then you notice that on the top here, well, let me zoom in on that again. You see, it's this, I've got this 3M13, CTAS, whatever that is. I forget what that is. Oh, Costas, Bob Costas. Q end. I've got, 3M14 with some adjectives. Those are markers, or they're called memory locations in Pro Tools, and they serve several functions. They let me know what the form of the cue is. They let me know where I am on the timeline, and I can navigate, and I'll show you how to do that eventually. Yeah, it's a big improvement, right, on your 13-inch laptops for me to zoom in like that. I'm a little mad at myself that I didn't figure that out last semester. I'll take 2 seconds and show you how to do that after we're done with this, before we start the next bit. All right, so let me play this. And this is the rough mixes. This is not the final mix. This is, as I'm working, this is what it sounds like when I send it off to my client. So that's a short cue. We'll move a little bit further forward to the next bit. Okay. Whoops. Please stop. Thank you, Pro Tools. All right. So as you can see, when you're looking at this, and when you heard that, so we're in the third act, right? We're towards the end of the third act, and you could tell that because of the way I've named it. It's D3M17. So it's a 3 stands for the act that I'm in, or the reel of the film, and M17 is the actual number of the cue. So a lot of these themes have been heard before earlier in the film. And so when I'm changing sections and jumping into a new piece of music, that's not really actually coming out of nowhere. That's actually coming out of a previous cue where that material has come in, and it's been reorchestrated, reworked. But as you can hear, it's incredibly complex. And this is all MIDI in Pro Tools. So one of the things I want to talk about now is why I don't write in Logic or any of the other DAWs. Well, I'd actually really like to know Logic a little bit better, or Ableton, to be honest with you, because it's much different. But I've never found a problem with Pro Tools and MIDI, personally, since version 6.4. And as you can hear, I've done an incredibly complex hybrid orchestral piece here with time signature changes, with tempo changes. I've got, and I did this on my old Mac Pro. I have 50 instrument tracks, and I wasn't killing, and lots of effects, and I wasn't killing the CPU. It does a lot more with MIDI than most people can think. And what I love about Pro Tools, the software, is that you could do everything inside of this one window. You don't have to have multiple windows open. It doesn't get too busy. And that's why I prefer to, when I'm teaching you how to edit MIDI, to open up this down here rather than having a second window open somewhere else, or like to have the MIDI editor floating on top floating on top here. Everything's just done in one window, and it's very clean. The only thing I wish that Pro Tools had that would be helpful for me would be like a little box up in this area here where I could play the film, so I don't have to have the film on a second screen. That's the one thing that I wish it did have. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these things. Now, I've got 50 instruments playing, 50 instruments loaded in. But you don't see anywhere where all 50 instruments are playing at once, okay? So when I do the assignment, you might think like, how am I going to write for so many instruments? Well, they don't all have to be playing at once. That's part of arranging and orchestration and developing a story while you're sequencing. And that's one thing that I want to impress upon you, is that while it's true in most popular music styles that the bass and the drums and the keyboards and the guitars will be playing for most of the track, they won't be playing the same thing from the beginning to the end. Even if you're doing a jazz piano trio, well, the drummer plays differently on the head than he does during the solo, and he doesn't play at the same volume and the same intensity during the solo. The solo, and the pianist is taking a solo, he's going up and down in intensity, and hopefully his accompanists, the bass and the drums, are doing that with him. If you're listening to a really good pop song that's an arrangement, it's the same thing. It's taking you on a journey by how dense it is, how undense it is, how busy are the instruments, not just in terms of denseness, the number of instruments that are playing, but how busy are those parts? Are the instruments playing chords that are really thick, or are they playing one note at a time, or just two notes at a time? What's the spacing of those notes? Are they close together? Are they wide apart? So all these things you take into effect as you're unfolding an arrangement, because you want to create something that engages the listener and takes them in on a journey. It tells a story with them. And, those of you that took film scoring with me last semester, you heard me say this, and I'll say it again, is that my entire professional life, like 85% of my professional life, music has been in the service of telling a story, whether it was my 35 years of playing piano on Broadway, playing shows, or whether it's, dovetailing the last 20, 25 years of writing music for pictures. Or whether I've been playing piano for singers, right? Whatever I do is supposed to help tell the story, right? And so that's highly influenced my creativity and the way I approach this technical work is how do you tell the story with what you're doing? Let's take a little dive into some of the technical things here. You could see that if we're just looking at this line here, and let me zoom in on this so it's a bit easier for you to see. Okay, so this green ruler here is our tempo. So I start off at 78, then I move to 69, right? And then 82, 83, 87, 108, 76. There's no trombones there, just 76. That's a Music Man joke. 69 again, 62, 82. So you see all those different tempos in the unfolding of the piece. And then hopefully if I was doing a good job, you noticed that things got fast, but it worked. There was one spot where there was a jarring tempo change. Well, that was because of what was going on with the picture. So now let's look here at this blue line here, the blue ruler. That's the tempo, the time signature. So I start off in 4/4. Then there's 2/4, 4/4, 3/4, 5/8, 4/4, 3/4, 4/4, 3/8, 4/4, 5/4, 4/4, 3/4, a measure of 15/16. That's because of a cut they did that I had to do that there in order to get this right here to really, hold on, this right here to really hit right on the downbeat. It was a 16th note short, so I had to write a 15/16 bar. Let's take a listen to that from right here at 62. Right. One, two, three. Right, because of what I wrote there, it's so spacey. There's no real pulse. You can't even tell that it's a measure of 15/16. So then right here, look at this little section here. 4/4, 9/8, 4/4, 13, 4/4. Let's take a listen to that and see how that works. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Whatever it is. Right, so it's 1 and 2. Right, so 1 and 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 1. Right? Right, and this 13/16 bar, because of the way I wrote it, it sort of all fits in. So all this stuff is possible inside of Pro Tools, right? And so it can do some very sophisticated things. And we're going to work on some of the, and then markers. So yeah, let me zoom in on that again. So this line here, these are markers or memory locations, right? The way that you add a memory location is you click on the spot and you hit the Enter key. Let's see, it's this one here. You hit the Enter key, right? So if I click on that spot and I hit this guy here, a memory location shows up. And then you can just type in a descriptor like, and boom, it just goes right in there. I'm going to undo that because I don't want that in this cue, but I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail. But I just wanted to show you how this works in practice, all the stuff that we're going to go through next. All right. So any questions on that? That was just, to show you a little bit of really advanced stuff that's going to contain some of the principles that we're going to work on today. All right. What you're going to do is you're going to set up a template for the assignment. Okay. And this is the assignment. This is in that, and I'll pop it up onto Google Classroom. So you're going to create a track in Pro Tools using only MIDI instruments. It can be a cover song, an original, or an arrangement of a classical piece. I'll put some sheet music in that folder that you got the link for there. For suggested classical pieces, I've got a couple of really nice Bartok pieces if you want to work on that, which is really good for your musical vocabulary. So make sure that your piece has some melodic and harmonic content. So in other words, and this is not a derogatory statement on rap, but not a rap tune. I want a tune that's got a chord progression and a melody, because then we can start working on some of these additional techniques. So use the editing techniques we've learned so far, plus additional ones we'll be going over in the coming weeks. Some light drum programming is okay, but I'd like to save a deep dive into drum programming for a future class that I've got set up for that. And in your session, please create all original classes and expand to, like we're going to go over today. And if you're going to use piano, Mini Grand is okay. And if you're going to use a drum kit, then one of the stock kits and expand to is okay. And if you use a bass, then just one of the stock bass is okay. But every other sound should be an original sound you programmed, and then just the rest of this stuff. So basically, undergraduates, 60 to 90 seconds long, using 8 instrument tracks. Undergraduate music majors, a little longer, using 10 instrument tracks. And graduate students, a little bit longer, using 12 instrument tracks. Okay, so this is in that folder that I just linked to. So what do I mean by programming an original sound? Well, it's very easy to use presets, right? But presets are things that everybody has access to. And with a little bit of ingenuity, you can create your own sounds that are using pre-existing material and altering it. And that's really satisfying to me. And it will make your music sound a little bit more unique, which is also good for you. The other side benefit is that we want to learn how to mix music. Well, creating your own sounds is learning how to mix different elements together to create a unique sound. So that will help get your head into the mixing space. It's not mixing per se, but it's a facet of mixing. How you put different sounds together to create an entire, an aggregate, a whole, a unified piece. So that's why I wanted us all to use Expand 2, because there are parameters there and it's easy for me to demonstrate some of these things using Expand 2. And you'd be surprised at the quality of some of the sounds you can come up with such a C+ rated piece of software. Before I do this, though, when you're about to work, what I would say to do is to pull out a note, whether it's a piece of paper or you type it in on your phone or something. Put together an idea of an ensemble that you'd like to work for. So what do you need? Well, you need maybe a couple of instruments that you can play melodies with. You need an instrument that'll play the bass or low end. You'll need maybe some sort of percussion. You'll need maybe some instruments that can give you a harmonic. You need instruments that can give you colors. And then how do you write for that ensemble? That's part of orchestration. So with a big band, right, you've got 4 trumpets, 5 reeds, 4 trombones, and rhythm section. That's your basic big band. Well, that's true, except that what else can you do with that configuration, with that same number of players, graduate students? Well, trumpets can use mutes, right? And what kind of mutes are there? Cup mutes, Harmon mutes, like a plunger mute. Reeds. Well, you've got 2 alto, 2 tenor, and baritone. Well, what if one of the alto players doubled on soprano and the other one doubled, and maybe 2 tenor players doubled on flute, and maybe the baritone player also played bass clarinet, and the second alto player also played soprano sax, right? You see, all of a sudden you've got that ensemble that's standardized, but depending upon how you create unique combinations of those instruments through your orchestrational skills, you can come up with really unusual timbres, right? In the rhythm section, you've got a guitar player. Well, okay, guitar is cool. So maybe you're playing a Brazilian tune and he's playing a nylon string instead of an electric guitar. And then maybe you're playing something with a funky rhythm and he's got a wah-wah pedal so that he can do like a shaft vibe, right? Your keyboard player is playing piano. Well, maybe he's got a synthesizer or an electric keyboard and he can play a Rhodes kind of an electric piano sound, or he can take a solo on a mini Moog sound on his keyboard. So if you got a drummer, and maybe the drummer has a splash cymbal or a china cymbal, or maybe they play sometimes with sticks or with brushes or with hot rods, which are like these. They're like little like they're not bamboo, but they're little shoots that are wrapped together. That they're harder than a pair of brushes, but softer than a drumstick, right? So you've got all these different things that you can do to take this standardized ensemble and create something unique. And it's the same here with using something like Expand 2. So let's go to the videotape. All right. So let me open up Expand 2. This is the GUI for Expand 2. From the top, going down, underneath where it says preset here, and let me zoom in on that a little bit. Right here where it says preset. Up. You can see that? Yes? You'll have to speak because I can't see the chat when I'm zoomed in like this. So,
yes.
Okay, great. So if you click here, this gives you the librarian, which are folders with subfolders, and they're all named. And if you notice at the bottom, I've created one called Pete Presets. And I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to show you where that lives so you can always navigate to it if you have to. So typically you would load in a preset from here, right? So if I wanted, let's say I wanted ethnic Kodo, I would just click here. And that's fine. But another way to load sounds in, and you can always go back to the factory default by clicking down here, factory default. And then this always comes in with this beneath the waves sound as the basic preset. Well, if you notice here, these are 4 slots or racks, you could call them. Excuse me, I need a little beverage break here. Getting parched. Each one of these racks can be loaded in with a different sound, and you can layer sounds together to create an aggregate sound. So I'm just going to focus on this one here, the top one. So this is part A. It's got an on and off button here, right? It's got a number here. This is the MIDI channel. Make sure these are all set to 1. I don't want to get into this for now. This is also multi-timbral. Let's just stay focused on one task at a time. Whoops. Just make sure they're all on 1. And then right here is the name of the sound, the folder that you find it in, and then the name of the actual patch. Over here you've got a level, which is a volume control, and you can click and slide on this. Here you've got a pan control, left, right. And then here you've got 2 effects sends, which I'll show you in a second. And then over here, you've got a bunch of other controls. So the play gives you a bunch of options. Over here, you transpose. So if you want a sound, let's say you want to create a sound that's an octave higher than the note you're playing on, you would just click and drag up 12 steps and you'd be an octave higher. If you wanted an octave lower, you would do the reverse. You would drag down. If you hold the Option key down and I'll show this when I go back to regular view and click on this, it will snap back to 0. This is the range. The high key is this one here, and the low key is this here. And I will go into these MIDI numbers maybe next week, but that's fine. Right here, you have whether the sound is polyphonic, meaning you can play chords, or monophonic, meaning one note at a time. And I'll also go into why you might one note at a time versus polyphonic in this in a minute. And then here, the voice mode is the number of notes it can play at one time. So right now, I've got it set to 32, and you can see it can go up to 64 notes simultaneously. And then the pitch bend range, it's up 2 steps, so a whole step, right? So if I, and I'll show you what that is when we look at the lead sound. So that's this page here. Then you've got an arpeggiation page and a mod page, and I'm going to go over that in a future, shortly. I have them programmed into some of my own sounds that I made. So let's say I want to make a sound. I have to have a conception of a sound. So I want to have an interesting keyboard sound. So if I click here, this brings up the same, right, set of folders as the last one did. With all these, but some different things inside of here, right? So I'm going to go down to electric pianos, and whoops, that's getting, let me scroll out just a little bit. Okay, that's still pretty big, but yeah, there you go. That makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm going to go to electric pianos, and it's got a list of basic electronic keyboards. So I'll load one in. So this is a Synth saw wave piano. It's like a keyboard. It's not really a piano, but you know, it's electric keyboardish like-ish. Cp80, which is a Yamaha acoustic piano that was portable with 1 string per note or 2 strings per note. And it was like a baby grand that had pickups in it. That was big in the late 70s through the 80s for live playing. I never had one. FM piano from the DX7, right? Harmonix electric piano. Mark II is a kind of a Fender Rhodes. It's a later version. And all these other ones. I'm going to go down and I'm going to go to a Mark I piano, which is an early version of a Fender Rhodes. And it's just going to give us a very basic, bland, vanilla sound, right? And let me get my pan back to the middle. There we go. All right, so I've got the sound in here. Okay. I want to do stuff to the sound. Whoops, come on, let's go. But before we do stuff to the sound, I want to take a little detour and discuss a few things with you. When you're creating synthesized sounds, which is what we're doing now, or if you listen to any kind of an acoustic instrument, they all have something called they all have a way of presenting the sound. So what do I mean by that? So if I were to play a drum, I hit it. It's got a very sharp attack, and then maybe there's a ring. But if I were to clap my hands together, it's got a very sharp attack, and then the sound cuts off. If I were to play a violin, well, I can make that sound different ways depending upon my bowing technique. I can make it sound, the sound gradually fade in and gradually fade out. I can play it really hard and biting. You could do that with a guitar as well. So if I were to play my acoustic guitar, right? If I were to play it like, whoops, let me get this out of here. If I were to play it like this, it's very sharp, right? There's a sharp part at the beginning and it just cuts right off. But if I play it like this, it's got a nice ring to it. The sound keeps ringing afterwards. There's a sustain to it, right? So playing techniques alter the sound. And in the 1960s, when Dr. Moog, Robert Moog, who actually, as I've mentioned before to some of you, is a graduate of Queens College in the 1950s for physics, and he did take some music classes. When he was creating his modular synthesizer, he was working with a guy named Herb Deutsch, who was living out in, I think, Massapequa on Long Island, and Dr. Deutsch became a music professor at Hofstra for a long time. They were trying to figure out a way to get the sound to behave more like an instrument instead of just being these out-of-control squeals. So they came up with this idea of an envelope, right? An envelope to the sound. So what is an envelope? An envelope is a table of data points that is the output over a specified period of time. It's triggered by a user event, by a new note or key press. So let's take a look at this. So basically, if you're playing a keyboard, or even if you're playing your own instrument, it has an envelope to it. So you press down the key, and you have an attack time, a decay time, a sustain level, and a release time. So notice, right? There are 3 of these that have the word time in it, and one has the word level in it. It's very important to understand that. So the attack is the amount of time it takes for a sound to go from 0 volume to full volume. So you press the key down, and the amount of time it takes to go from no volume to full volume is the attack. The decay is the amount of time it takes for the sound to decrease from that peak of the attack to a sustain level. So in other words, here's your attack, no volume, full volume. Your decay is full volume down to this level, and this level, this is the sustain level. This stays at that level, right? That's the level of the output while a sustain instruction persists. So an instruction would be like you press the key down on a keyboard. You're telling the keyboard to hold that note down, or the synthesizer to hold that note down, to keep playing it, right? Now, the release, right? So remember that the sustain parameter is a measure of level. That's volume, not time, because the time is dependent upon you, the person, how long you hold that key down. These are programmed in as finite durations that you program in, the attack, the decay, and the release. The sustain level is user-generated. The length of the time that the sustain level persists is generated by the performer. Now, I'm going to show these examples of these. And then the release time is the time it takes for the output to decrease to 0 after the key is let go. So how does that work here? Well, if we look up in this area here, we have smart knobs, and notice that easy is turned on. So what the programmers did with Expand is that they took parameters that are most likely to be used for whatever sound is programmed at that particular moment, and they made them available to you, the user. So, right, you understand that every sound you choose will have a different set of parameters for you to play around with depending upon the type of sound it is, and the engineers made that choice for you. That makes it easy. It limits your choices and doesn't make it so you're overwhelmed. All right? So the smart knobs here at the top, that it's easy, they affect all 4 of these slots. So in other words, we're going to populate these other slots with different sounds to create an aggregate sound. if you look here, you have A, B, C, and D. Let me zoom in on that. A, B, C, and D. These are the smart knobs for each of these slots, right? There's nothing in slot B because I don't have a sound in there. And the same with C and D. And you notice when I click on A, the letter A gets highlighted. The letter B, C, and D are gray, but if I click on D, you notice that D is highlighted. So that's how you know when you're working on one of these guys. All right. So if we look at the easy one, we notice that there's an attack and a decay and a release. But when we go here to the Rhodes, there's no attack, decay, and release because they think that you're going to typically play this as a piano. But I want to look at this more as a pad sound. So it has something called soften attack. So I'm going to play some notes. And you see now, I've lost some of that high bell. So that makes the sound a little softer. And then I want this to sustain a little bit after I let go. So this is... So I'm playing around with this, and now I don't like the way that that's working. So I'm going to have to do that on this level here after I finished programming. So I want to make this a little bit motion, and you've got here a tremolo rate and a tremolo depth because these pianos typically had a built-in tremolo. And a tremolo is a volume on and off. So in other words, if I turn up the depth here, right, you're getting, and I slow this down, this is moving back and forth between the left and right speaker of my headphones. But typically what tremolo does is it'll turn the volume on, volume off, volume on, volume off. So I'm going to add a little bit of that. All right. So that's my starting sound. So I want to add something to that. All right. I'm going to go to slot B here, and I'm going to click in this area here. And what if I go to a soft pad? Let me zoom back again so I can see all these sounds here. Whoops. All right, it's hard for me to see everything in here when I'm zoomed all the way in like that. So let's do ocarina pad. Now, if I just want to solo the ocarina pad, I can turn off A by clicking here, and that becomes inactive. I don't like that, so I'm going to try another one. Soft brass pad. I like the beginning of that, but I don't like the filter. So I'm going to change the attack of that filter. And then I'm going to talk about filters in a second, but I'm going to slow the attack down. So see how that's now coming in slower? And I'm going to add a little release so that when I let go of the sound, it lingers on. Now I'm going to play that together by turning on the electric piano. So I've just listened to that. I've played it a little bit. And the electric piano is too loud, right? So I'm mixing now. So I'm going to turn the level right here down of the electric piano a little bit. That's too much. Bring it back up a little bit. Great. So now what I want to do is I want to see if I can add something that has a little bit of a sheen to it, right? So let's look here. All right, let me turn these off and listen to the bell. Okay, so my release is too high now. So I might like this, I might not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to transpose it up an octave so that it sounds an octave higher than I'm playing. Just going to click and drag that up to 12. And now let me play that with these guys. Right, so this is way, way, way too loud. So I'm going to bring that down. So let me look at this again. So I want to make the attack even longer so that the bell comes in a little bit after I play. Even more. Okay, I'm liking that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my easy and I'm going to work here on the attack and slow the whole attack down of everything. And hear how that's changing over time? I'm just holding down a chord. That's the envelope of the brass pad bringing that loud thing back in. So that's really cool. So I like that. Let me move this here. So, all right, let me zoom back out again. All right, so I've got this sound that I really like. I want to save it as a preset for myself. So what you do is you click this little, let me zoom in. This downward facing triangle right here next to preset. And you're going to go save settings as. Now, this comes up and you're going to scroll down to the bottom and notice how everything is numbered, starting off with a 0, right? And that's because there's 2 digits. So if you put 0, these will always show up by name in this order. If this was just 1 without the 0 in front of it, then it would show up after 11. So you're going to scroll down to the bottom, and I've created folder 30. But for class right now, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to do this 31 space class, and you would put your name, presets. And then I'm going to title this. Notice how they've got 3 numbers, a space, and then the name. Here, I'm going to keep that consistent, all right? So 0, 0, 1, warm, roads, pad. And then I'm going to save that. And notice warm roads pad. And if you click on this and you scroll to the bottom, let me go up here. Class presets, warm roads pad. So you can always load that back in. Now, just so that I can teach you where the path is, if you go to your Macintosh hard drive, and you go to Documents, there's a Pro Tools folder in there. And in the Pro Tools folder, there's Plugin Settings. Scroll all the way down to the bottom because it starts with the letter X. And is it in this one? Yeah. And there it is. So why is it good to know this? Well, let's say you came up with you're working on a preset with a friend of yours, right? You can send them this as an attachment in an email, and they can populate it into their folder, and they can open it up and they can tweak it, and they can, so you guys can collaborate. So you'll know where those things are. Questions so far? All right. So let me show you a few presets that I made. So this is the first one. It's called Smooth Pad. And you see I'm moving this modulation slider here, creating some motion. So I'm going to show you. So before we do that, let's talk about filters for a second. Where are you? Filters right here. All right. So filters are basically volume controls. They control the volume of certain frequencies and allow them to be heard or not heard. So we're going to talk about hold on, let's see. Easy. Yes, Paul, that's correct. Yes, Ashley, that's correct. I'll go over that again. Thank you for asking that. Yes, you would click on the letters on the top left. They correspond with the slots. Yes, exactly. Okay. So in this class, we're going to learn, just think about two filters, high pass and low pass. I'll get into high pass later on, but low pass does exactly what it says it does. It allows low frequencies to pass through. Right? So basically, it's a curve like this, and if from the bottom to the top is volume, from left to right is low pitches or low frequencies to high frequencies. If you notice that this is a low-pass filter, the curve of it, and as it gets higher in frequency, it cuts the volume of those frequencies down, and then above a certain point, you don't hear the sound anymore. It doesn't allow those volumes to go through. So how does that actually work in the real world? Sorry, Ken, I'm teaching you stuff you should be teaching. Okay, so this is EQ1, and when I first start teaching people how to use EQ, I teach using this, and I teach them just to basically get used to shaping sound with a low-pass filter and a high-pass filter. So this guy here is a low-pass, that's the symbol for low-pass filter. So when I click on this, watch what happens over here. Okay, so this is a frequency graph. This over on the left, it says 20, and all the way here, 10,000. So this is hertz, vibrations per second. And I will be getting into a much more detailed explanation of this stuff in about a month. But let's just go broad strokes now with the general idea, and then we'll fine tune it as the semester goes along. So you can adjust the frequency by turning this knob, and you'll see the readout here and here. So what that is doing is that's moving the starting point where this ball is. And you can also click and drag the ball. So if you notice that actually the curve starts a little bit before the little ball, and also it has a slope to it, an angle. That has to do with this thing called the Q for the filter. So there are 4 adjustments here. There's 6 decibels per octave, 12, 18, and 24. Give me one sec here. I got a prop. So right here, I've got a little Moog synthesizer, right? And this knob here is the filter, and you turn it physically. And the Moog synthesizer comes with a 24 decibel per octave filter, all of them. Some of them you can switch to other filter types, but the classic Moog filter on a synthesizer is 24 decibel per octave. So it's as you could see, it's a very sharp cutoff there, as opposed to a more gentle slope. So
switch camera.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just noticed that as you said it. So the 24 decibel per octave, very sharp to more gentle. So how does that affect the sound? Well, let's do this with, let me put in here, let me just put in mini grand so we have a piano sound. And let me pop that up there. All right, so we got a piano sound. So I'm going to play with I'll play chords like this, and then I'm going to drag this frequency down and listen to how the timbre changes. You see how muffled that gets? Because we're cutting off all the high overtones. Now, on a technical level, if I do this, right? So if I play, you can see that with this almost off, you can see what the frequency is doing. These are the higher frequencies up here, and these are the lower frequencies. And from bottom to top is volume, soft volume to louder volume. So let me do this. So you could see the orange is the original curve. And you see now, you can see how much less overall volume there is, but also much less activity up in this area here. Now, if I make that really sharp at 24 decibels per octave, right, that dullness starts at a higher frequency because we're cutting off more of the higher overtones. And basically, that's an effect that you can use for a sound. So, right here, hold on a second, let me make sure yes, okay, great. Right here, we've got a cutoff filter. So this cutoff means cutoff filter. So if I play this pad sound, click and drag this to the left, you can hear it getting darker. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to show you how to automate that so you can change that as your piece unfolds. So this is another reason why I wanted to use Expand, because all this stuff is very easy for me to teach these basic concepts. And then you can do this on so many different pieces of software. So let's look at how I've got this set up, right? So this is my guitar pad. Oh, wait, I don't think I've got the right one open. Yeah, I do. Okay. So what I did with this was That was the original sound. Right? Probably didn't have that long of a release to it. So I just brought up the attack. Play around with the filter to get the sound that I want. I want to maybe make it so it's not so. Just a little more release. So you get a really nice, that alone is a really nice sound. So let's look at what we did with, turn this off, and let's look at B. And then B is highlighted here. Okay, so what's going on with B? Why is there no sound? All of a sudden there's no MIDI? Okay, I'm not sure why this is not sounding. But let's look at our third sound. So that's the breathy pad, right? So I layered those two sounds together. I'm not sure why the last one is not, why this middle one. I just reloaded the sound. Let me see if that, here we go. So that's the reverse glass, right? So you hear that there's some motion in there, right? That's an LFO, low frequency oscillator. So now the next term that I want to teach you today, and I know I'm teaching you a lot of stuff, but you'll be able to review all this stuff, is modulation. Okay? Modulation is the act of changing the quality of your voice in order to achieve or create a particular effect by making it louder, softer, lower, pitched, etc. Her vocal modulation was most impressive. Most of us think of modulation as a change from one key to another. So, you know, the harmony and modulations of Bach. So in other words, you start the song off in the key of B flat, and the bridge goes to G. For our purposes here in this study, what was the name of this EQ using? That was EQ1, Chris. That's comes with Pro Tools. So for this class, I'm only going to use things that come natively with Pro Tools. All right, I'm not going to be using any of my third-party plugins. For us, right here, this is the one that we're going to look. The act of influencing something by changing it or controlling it. And what that translates out to is that you control a parameter of a sound from something else. So let's look at this reverse glass, right? You can hear that pulsing, right? Okay, so if we look here in our controls, we have play, ARP, and mod. So if I click on mod, we've got all these controls here. Now, if I click here, it gives me a bunch of different wave forms. Sine wave, which looks like it's just sort of like a big U. Triangle, which looks like a triangle. A sawtooth looks like a sawtooth. Square, they all look like the shapes that they're talking about. And these are things that I'm going to get into, again, more detail over the next couple of weeks. This is just a basic introduction to this stuff so you can start playing around with it. When it has the word sync after it, that means it's synchronized to the tempo of your track. And I've got it here playing around with the filter. Right? You can select whether it does pitch. You see how the pitch is changing there? We can do volume. We can do pan, so it goes back left and right, but I've got it set to filter. And then it's got a rate, very slow. Right? This is sync to tempo, but if it was just like triangle, and the depth is how pronounced the effect is, so you could do some really crazy, out of control things. But it's up to you to have some taste. And this is part of mixing as well, because you're making decisions about how you want the timbre to sound, which when you're mixing, you're making decisions about how you want your piece to sound, balancing things out. So this is a good introduction to this for you guys. So that's, let me go back to my original sound. So now with all three of these together, now hold on one second. Let me change view to this one. All right, so this is the sound. Now all of you have keyboards, and your keyboards have, let me change to this, have wheels over here. One wheel, usually the furthest, one wheel is a modulation wheel and one wheel is a pitch bend wheel. This is reversed from Mini Moog, because on a Mini Moog, the pitch bend is on the outside and the mod wheel is on the inside. And the one, that's the pitch bend, I'm sorry. No, this is the right way, pitch bend. And then the mod wheel, you can set it where you want it to be. So, as I move that mod wheel, you can hear the sound changing. Now, I have that set on this controller here, but you guys all have mod wheels on your keyboards. Give me 1 second. Let me get a prop. If you have something like this keyboard, it's got these ribbons on the side that do the same thing. All right. So you might not have a physical real wheel, but you'll have some sort of controls on almost all your keyboards that you purchased today. But you don't need those. You can draw it in, and we will get into that. All right. So I've got this programmed because it's easier for me to reach. Right, and it's affecting, I've got it set up to affect the entire patch. Okay, so that's a look at that. Then I've got a suitcase pad. And this is done by layering a suitcase piano, and let's see what I did to that. Soften the attack, tremolo. I didn't play around with much more. Then for the celeste, played around a little bit with the cutoff, the attack and the release.
Could you share your screen again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's like, thank you. I apologize. Okay, so for the celeste, I played around a little bit with the cutoff. See that they've got these knobs here? That's the default. And then when you move it around, you've changed it. Then I played around with the attack and the release. So this is the celeste, what I've done to it. So you see that's a real celeste, which has a sharper attack. But when I layer that with the Rhodes, I get a nice. And then the last one is a pad called Sunrise. It's got a lot of motion in it. action levels. So you see how they added this in? So basically you put the sound in and you play around with those things. So I don't know why this is doing this. Okay, let me just call that back up. Right, so that's nice. And notice how I've changed the level of a lot of these things to balance stuff out. All right, let's do it now. So, all right, so I've done some paddy stuff. What else can you do? So with this one, I layered 3 different drums together. So let's turn off B and C. So this is Thunder Drum. Oh, that got changed to MIDI channel 4, sorry. So it's got a nice, I think with this one, yeah, I made a little bit less. That's the original sound. I want it to be punchier, so I turned down the decay. And this is a Cole. Right, so it's a very high-pitched drum. So these two together. And then my big drum. That's like a frame drum, right? Like a Celtic frame drum. And you add them together. I would use that in a film score. I have no problem with that. All right, so you have a passage and you want to play it in the strings, but you want it to have a little percussion to it. So there's a spiccato, which is a bouncing of the bow on the string patch, which sounds like this. Right? So to that, I added a marimba. And then I added a vibraphone. And the way it's set up is that if I hit really hard on the keyboard, you hear more of the percussion sounds. And if I play softer, they kind of disappear out. And then you can't hear this because Zoom is in mono, but I've panned the marimba to the left and the vibraphone to the right. I don't think I did anything else to the sounds with this. I just layered those 3 together. So that's a nice... Anyway, enough of that noise. So, and then one last, okay, let's move forward though to this vintage lead because I want to talk about mono versus polyphony. So a vintage lead, what do I mean by that? I mean Keith Emerson or Chick Corea wailing on a mini Moog, or Rick Wakeman with his stupid cap and, well, I shouldn't say that. Rick Wakeman with his cape and his wizard's hat on, or Jordan Rudess with Dream Theater blowing 5 million notes in the time it takes for you to blink your eye, you know? So I layered 3 different sounds together to get that. So let's take a look at that and why you'd want that to be mono. So just a soft, and then a vintage synth lead. So I've got soft panned a little bit to the left, the vintage a little bit to the right, and then this smooth one right in the middle. And the reason why you would want this in mono is because you want to play one note at a time, but then you could do stuff like this, where you could play those Or you could do trills. So that's one reason why you would have that be mono. And there are some effects on that. I'll talk about that next week. Let's just get these sounds happening. Okay. So basically, we're going to switch topics and talk about more MIDI editing stuff for the rest of the class. Any questions on any of this, right? This should be fun. So for next week, get your template together with your sounds. Decide what your orchestra is going to be for the number of instruments for your level of academia in school, and make your template.
Professor?
Yes.
Do you mind playing the vintage lead maybe in the polyphonic? I didn't really understand.
Sure. So here it is in monophonic. Let me show you what I'm doing with my hands. That'll help also. So like part of the playing style, right, is to do things like this. Right? They do that. So I'm holding my thumb down when I'm playing that, and I'm not moving it off the keyboard. And it's going back and forth. It's only playing one note at a time instead of two. So if I change this to polyphonic, you see that how it's just a different sound. You can play chords, but you're not getting the same kind of sound that you would need for the lead. So yeah, polyphonic lead sounds are great, but the classic 1970s jazz fusion, progressive rock, screaming synth sound is mono. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question, Pete.
Yes, Ken.
How did you make it velocity sensitive? That other patch, you said as you played harder, the other sound came in, but I don't see any velocity functions on this.
Yeah, how did I do that? Was that a happy accident? That was with the percussive strings, right? Mm-hmm. I think I played around with the Moore mallet. Ken, I think that's what I did with that. I think that's how I did that, by playing around with the Moore mallet. But also, it's interesting because the spiccato strings don't really have... Yeah, I guess the other thing, too, is that the mallets have more of a dynamic range and they cut through more, But I think I played around with the mallet, more mallet to get more of the dynamic. They don't have a velocity curve is what you mean, right? If they had a velocity curve, then you could adjust the velocity curve more, but they don't have that built into this. So, like I said, this is like an older piece of software, but there's still so much you can learn from it. And since we'll all be on the same page, I just have to teach this one piece of software, as opposed to all these that have different controls that you have to learn each one of them, which drives you crazy. All right, but these concepts, envelopes, cutoff filter, attack, decay, that's present. Okay, Kevin. That's present in all synthesis, right? All right, let me close this. So this session is up on on that link I sent you. So if you want to look at those sounds. Okay. So Okay, so let me play you this. It's a sloppy drum groove. All right, so I want to fix that, right? So the fastest notes are 16th notes. So I could just go like this and do option 0, and boom, it's all quantized. Well, that's kind of like the lazy way, so I'm going to undo that with Command Z, and let's get into a little bit more detail. So I'm going to leave this on, and I'm going to open up my edit lane. Now, let me show you a key command. You see how this is selected? If I want this to fit inside the window, right? It's Control, Option, and the letter F like fit. See that? F like fit. So Control, Option, Fit. F. All right. So let me resize this here. And I only want to play with the drums first. I have too many of these strip charts open. Okay, great. Now, all of these notes, they're really long. And for the drums, you don't need to worry about the duration. So I want to get them into a format where it's easy for me to see. So I've got my quantize window open. I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to go to Change Duration. And I'm going to make all of these the same length. So let me scroll in so you can see this. So I'm going to make them 0, and I want to make them less than a 16th note. So a 16th note is 240. So I can make them, let's say I make them randomly like 160. It doesn't really matter. And then hit Apply. Oh, I don't want, why does the limit range come up? Hit Apply. And now they're all the same length. And it doesn't change. For drums programmed like this, it doesn't change the sound. Whoops, excuse me. I have to get a little slicker at this zooming in and out. I got to practice that. Sorry. Right. So that sounds the exact same as the other way. So I've soloed the drums. So there are 3 instruments. There's hi-hats, cross stick, and kick drum. So let's work on quantizing each one of those lines separately. So I want to select the hi-hats, right? So I could use the grabber tool and just click and lasso all of those like that. Or I could just click here. It's a C sharp or an F sharp. So if I click there, they all get selected, right? And the way that you can figure that out is just click until you see the note. Right? So I'm just clicking and dragging down. So if I hover, the notes change color, but you don't hear anything. But if I click, I'm clicking with the mouse and dragging down, you can hear all the different instruments. So when you get to the hi-hat, you click on that. All right. So let's play around with this a little bit. So that's dot 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 dot, right? So it's eighth, 2/16, eighth, 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 right? So it's eighth, 2/16, and the rest of the measure is eighth notes. Eighth, 2/16, and the rest of the measure is eighth notes. So it's that's the pattern. Well, what if I wanted this to do something called a lope, L-O-P-E a little bit, have like a little bit of a swing to it? Well, let's play around. You experiment, and if you don't like it, you undo it. So you've got an option here for swing. And it opens up to 100%. Let me tell you that if you set it to 50, that's no swing at all. That's straight. And as you go up, it adds more of a swing feel to it. All right? So, for example, I'm just going to type in 57. And my quantized grid is set to 16th notes, and I'm going to hit Apply. So let me show you another trick so you can just work on the drums. So I'm going to click. I've got the snare drum, the cross stick, and the kick drum. See how they're highlighted? if I want to mute them so I can only hear the hi-hats and focus in on them, it's Option M. Nope, that's not it. Excuse me. Command M. Sorry. All right, so now for the time being, these notes are muted and I can right? So if I were to make that straight 16th notes, it's a little stiff, and that I'll explain why it's a little stiff sounding for many reasons. But so now if I make the swing, I make the swing a little more pronounced. Let's go up to like maybe 63. Yeah, there we go. Bum. That's better. Okay, great. So now next thing I'm going to do is the kick drum. So if I click here and highlight the kick drum and do Command M like Mary again, it's unmuted. All right, so now if I want to play around with this, maybe I want it to be a little bit less strict. So maybe I'll make it 90% on the strength. Remember, we went over that last week. And what if I make the swing on here not as pronounced? So maybe if I go back to 57 on this. Right? See, that's feeling good. I've got the strength at 80%. Great. So now I want to work on the cross stick. So I highlight that and Command M, and let's take a listen. Whoops, go back to the beginning. All right, so I'm not hearing the kick drum. It's too soft, so I'm going to make that louder. Okay, so this one, what happens if I make it straight 16th notes? Let's just see. Well, actually, yeah, this does have a little 16th note at the end. All right, so it's got 16th notes here. These are all right on the backbeat, and 16th notes here and here. So what if I just highlighted these and made those swing a little? And also just these here, right? So you don't have to quantize everything. Okay, so that's feeling pretty good to me, right? Now, answer, you guys can type it into the chat room, but I'm going to play this and tell me what's wrong with the balance of each instrument. Like, is there one instrument that's too soft or one instrument that's too loud? Anybody venture a guess? Yes, Alan, that's exactly right. The cross stick is too loud. So I'm going to make that softer. In MIDI, I'm going to click on this. And notice they're all highlighted. I can just either click here and drag this down. Yes, it does do the woodpecker thing. Better. Now, there's more that you could do. I could take this first of the 16th notes on the hi-hat and make it softer. Right? So that's adding a little bit of a nice feel to that. Okay, so let's look at our percussion. And this is just a conga, so let me, hold on, let me go back here and, right. So if I solo this, playing very simply. So I can select all of this, and I'm just going to use Command A. Well, I'm in here. I have to click in the field, and then Command A. They're all highlighted, and then Option 0. And this has 16th notes. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to go with that 63 so that it fits in with the hi-hat. And I'm going to keep it loose. I'm only going to make the strength at 80%. So it's not like, it's just fixing it a little bit, right? And then I'm going to bring the volume down because it's too loud. Yes, I only brought the first kick up instead of all because that was too soft, relatively speaking. I left it that way on purpose to show you. It was really soft. You couldn't actually hear it. Ken. Yeah. I mean, I could bring up all the kicks that they're extremely loud, but I'm leaving a little bit of my performance in there. All right, strings. So there's two things here. We got a little figure here for strings. Oh, come on. Let's fit that. Actually, let me disappear for a minute. And let me fit that in. Okay. So, before we edit that, let's talk about creating tempo maps. All right. So let me zoom in. This is all at 72. Right. So let me zoom in here. And let me get this down here. All right. So over here, you see it says tempo. It's the tempo editor. And this triangle is the expander collapse for that. So if I click on this, it opens up this whole thing. And let me zoom out again. Right? And this is like similar to the MIDI editor in that you can do detailed work on your tempo here. Excuse me one second. False alarm. I thought I was going to sneeze. You can resize this by hovering at the bottom. Click and drag up. Right? And if you look here, this is the tempo range, 1,400. You can change that right over here. So let me zoom in on this side here. So, whoops, there we go. So we've got the plus and the, oh, wait, hold on. Look at the wrong thing here. It's a little confusing to me. Okay, so right up here, you've got a plus and minus. So if I make this minus, you see now we're seeing this green line. And you notice here, the numbers change. So watch when I hit the plus sign. And then if I hit the minus. So that's zooming in and out of the tempo. So let's keep it somewhere moderate. And then it's got a slider here that you can, right? Or you can use these upwards and down arrows, or you can just hover in here and use the scroll wheel on your mouse or your trackpad. Okay. Let me zoom out again. All right. So, what if I want to do right? Do an accelerando and a decelerando. How do I do that? Well, you got your pencil tool. So again, remember I told you at the beginning here, we're just going to play around with the line, straight line. We're not going to use freehand. I will show you how to use these other ones as we progress on in the semester, but let's stay, this is so much information I'm imparting upon you. Let's just try to stay simple. So, all right, we'll start off at 72 and let's scroll this up a little bit. And let's say I want to get up to like like by the middle up to 80. So I'm going to go where I want to end up and click and drag and meet that dot there. And let's listen now. And then I can go in the opposite direction. Right? Now, that's exaggerated. It's too much. So let me zoom this so I can see this again. And let's just do a little bit. It changes the tempo for all tracks, Andrew. The entire piece. You don't have individual. Okay, no, gotcha. The rest of this will be up online. No, hopefully by Wednesday. Actually, there was another program that I used to use called Studio Vision Pro that had these things called nested subsequences, and you could have things with different tempos and all this stuff going on in each one of those nested subsequences. And I don't know why nobody else does that 25 years later. So anyway. Right, so just a little bit like that. I'm adding a little bit of life to the tempo, right? So you can go through your whole piece and make it sound more like right? You can draw that stuff. You can draw that stuff in, and it sounds like it's conducted. And do I do that in my film scores? Yes, I do. Not as much as I would on free music, but I definitely do it. Okay, now let's get into things that you can do for orchestration. All right, so the timing of this is all off. So I'm just going to quickly, yes. Oh, thank you. I got you. Thank you. All right, so the timing of this is all off. So, and, okay. Have we frozen? There we go. You know, there's a key command that I hit that does something weird to it, and it always happens when I'm trying to quantize something if I hit the wrong letter. And it sort of freezes up for a second. So I'm just going to quickly quantize this to 16th notes, and I'll leave it at 80% so it's not right on. Okay, so let me show you how to navigate notes. Let's get this over here so you could see everything. So right here, I've got my 4 arrows. So I push the right arrow, and you see I go to the next note, back arrow, now, there is so that's the first thing, right? So if you're editing notes and you want to navigate quickly through notes, you can do this. And if you have a chord, it'll go up and down the chord, and then to the next chord, it'll go up and down the chord. So it's the right and the left arrow. Now, there is a dedicated transpose for the event operations in Pro Tools, and I will get into that. But for right now, to quickly transpose things. So let's say I've got this selected. If I want to go up a half step, it's the up arrow over here. And to go down, it's the down arrow. Now, what if I want to drop something down an octave? So let's say I want to do an accent on this beginning. So I'm going to copy this note, right, which is Command C. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and press the downward arrow, and that note is dropped down an octave. And that's nice. What if I want to have that note and the original note? Well, I copied the original note. It's still in my buffer. I can merge paste, which is Option M, and that merges in with the original note. So you have both now. And I can do the same thing here. Copy, Shift, down, Option M. Great. So now, over here, I've got this here. What if I want to revoice those chords, right? In other words, if I want to take one of the notes and change its position. So if I hold down the Shift key, whoops, and I start selecting whoops, not these. Jeez, it's acting really weird. Let me try that again. So I'm going to just select the middle notes of all these, right? I can hold the Shift key and push the downward arrow. And I've changed the voicing of that, right? If I do another octave down, and then I undid that twice with Command Z, and it went back up to the original pitch. So you could do things like that with that command. All right, so that's Shift and the downward or upward. And if I wanted to jump that up an octave, right, so that these are in, I guess those are thirds probably. Right, so that's the Shift and the upward arrow. So you can revoice passages like that, which is kind of cool. Paul asked about getting rid of a marker or a memory location. So if you just click and highlight that and hit the delete key, it'll go away. Let me show you one last thing about markers, memory locations. Yeah, the PAS frequency, I purchased that, Ashley. I do have, there is a frequency that you can get for free. I don't know if I have it in this computer yet. No, I don't have it in this computer yet. I'll put it in next week so I can use that when I'm explaining it. But there's a company called Blue Cat Audio, I believe, that has a frequency meeting, a free frequency doohickey. Yeah. Yeah, I actually own a few of their plugins, Blue Cat Audio. They've got, and I have to install them in this new computer. Okay. So let me show you one more thing with these markers. They also help you in navigating. So what do I mean by that? Well, look, if we go to our window, right, it says memory locations. That brings up this little menu here, this little window. It's also Command and 5 on your numeric keypad, for those of you that have extended keypads. So there's all sorts of stuff here that's really cool. But let's just, one more last thing is, you notice that they've got these numbers here. Well, if you've got an extended keyboard and you type in decimal point, the number, and another decimal point, it will jump to that memory location. So right now, I'm right at measure 3, which is where the drums and the percussion swing are. If I wanted to go to piano creating an arrangement, which is number 4, if I hit decimal point 4 decimal point, you see I've gone to measure 21. If I want to go back to marimba, I can just go decimal point 3 decimal point. And you see the playback head jumps back to there. So that's a really great way to navigate around. Memory locations are really great. You can set up screen sets, all sorts of stuff. But let's just do the this beginning thing right here where you actually use it to denote your sections. And we'll get into that as the week goes on. So I think that's going to pretty much do it for today. That was quite a bit of information. Any questions before I beg off?
What was the key command again for fit?
Control. Well, you have a selection, Ken. So like, there's a selection, right? Hold
Right.
on. Let me just do that. So I've got a selection here, or let's say I double click on this. It's a Control Option and the letter F, like fit. So it's the same as all, except it's fit. F. You know how to do all, right? That's Control Option A. So if I did Control Option A, you see my whole arrangement is in there. But Control Option F gets me just the highlighted area, the selected area.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so I'll get on your homeworks. If you haven't handed in a homework, please try to get it in by tomorrow. I'm going to look at the stuff tomorrow afternoon. Even if you're not finished, just get something in, and I'll give you feedback on it. You can always resubmit it if you want it to get a better grade. For next week, just have your template set up with your sounds that you've created and an idea of the kind of piece of music you're going to do. If you want to let me know what piece you're doing, or if it's an original, that's fine. But just get that started. Try to get your template done by next week. All right? Any other questions? All right. I think that we're good for today.
Thanks.
So you guys all have a great week. And I'll be getting up this video. I'll try to get it up by Wednesday. Right, the presets by template. Right, you're speaking about all the presets. Depending upon your level, it'll be either whatever it was in the PDF, 8, 12, 15. I forget what it was, but whatever your level is, it's pretty well spelled out in that, and that's up on the. Yep, no problem. All right, everybody, have a great week. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.